Check, check, mic check. Check, check, mic check. Welcome to Podcast Envy. I'm your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder, and today I want to talk about solo episodes. So this was inspired by a post that I saw in a Facebook group, Probably She Podcasts, which is an excellent Facebook group for you to join if you are a new, long-time, or aspiring podcaster. And also, you must be a she podcaster, not a he podcaster. Sorry, guys. Anyway, this is about solo episodes. So as you know, in podcasting, there are many different ways to structure a podcast and to structure an individual podcast episode. A solo episode, of course, is where it's just you talking to your listeners like this. Right now, what I'm doing, solo episode. And sometimes people get hung up on these solo episodes. Like, who would want to listen to me talk for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes? And what would I even say? I mean, do I have that much content? And what's going to keep people listening? And what if I sound like a complete idiot? And what if I say something wrong? How do I even go about doing this? Do I just turn on the mic and stream of consciousness talk? Do I write it out? Do I have bullet points? Okay, like anything else, there are a bunch of different ways that you can think about your solo episodes. So number one, why even bother doing solo episodes? Aren't interviews enough? I mean, sure, maybe you don't have to do a solo episode, but there are some very good reasons why you might consider it. I'm going to tell you a little story. So when I first started the Creative Impostor, my first podcast, I intended to do all interviews. I wanted to do a weekly show with all interviews, and I wanted to talk to people to learn about creativity, entrepreneurship, and imposter syndrome. And I started out and it was great, and I was enjoying the interviews, and they took me a long time to produce because, as you know, I don't like to just record shows and then put the recording up without doing a full edit, without listening to it, without removing mistakes and heavy breathing and ums and boring content and things like that. I like to take all that stuff out and have a very high-end, well-produced show. That's what I like to deliver. Therefore, it was taking me a long time to complete those episodes, and I was like, if I do this, I'm going to have like one episode a month. So I thought that perhaps doing solo episodes would take less time and enable me to be more consistent. That was the whole reason I started doing these solo episodes for the Creative Impostor. And what I found was I was right. It did take less time. Ding, ding, ding. What I also found was the feedback from my listeners is that while they love the interviews, and let's face it, guys, interviews get more downloads than solo episodes. And that is because there are two of you that people may be looking for and who are promoting the episode. So yes, two is better than one in terms of downloads. However, my regular subscribers and core listeners said that they loved the solo episodes even more than the interviews, and that they were making a deeper impact. My thought is that if you are wanting to build a one-on-one committed relationship between you and your listeners, creating that whole know, like, and trust factor is much faster and more direct and more effective through good solo episodes than through interviews. And so that brings me to number two. How do you make a good solo episode? So I'm going to assume that since you are listening to this right now, and since most of my Podcast Envy episodes are solo, you think that I do good solo episodes, otherwise you wouldn't be listening. Here are a few things to consider. What is the primary objective of your solo episodes? This is going to help you determine your tone and your style or your approach. Are you hoping to teach your listeners something like I'm doing here on Podcast Envy? Are you hoping just to connect and tell personal stories from your life? Are you hoping to inspire them? Are you doing it for entertainment purposes, like comedy? Are you giving quick tips? What is the purpose behind your solo episodes? If you know why you're doing them and very specifically what you want your listeners to get out of them, that'll help you determine how to go about structuring the actual episode. In general, no matter what your desired outcome is, I'm going to give you a little secret. The best solo episodes are stories. I'm going to say that one more time. Even if your main objective is to teach someone something or give quick tips, the best solo episodes are stories. Those stories could be from your own life. Those stories could be about something else, like maybe a history story. But consider that most humans, all humans? I don't know. Well, most humans learn best through stories. That is how our brains function. Our brains crave stories and they process information that way. That's how we learn. That's how we connect. That's how we grow. That's how we stay interested, is through story. I'm sure there are some exceptions to that somewhere, but whatever. We're going to forget about those right now. So remember how I told you a story about why I started doing solo episodes? That's what that's all about. So think about how you can include a story in your episode. So that was a twofer. One way to make your solo episodes good is to think about what you want your listeners to get out of the episode so that you know what tone and structure. 2, include stories. 3, talk for as long as you need to illustrate whatever it is that you're illustrating and not a moment longer. So how long is that? There is no answer to that question. As long as you need without going on longer than you need. You'll find your own rhythm as you go. The more you do your solo episodes, you'll find that you tend to run out of steam or you tend to have covered your point around the same minute marker every single time. It might take a few episodes to get there, but you will. And if you don't know how long you need to make a point or illustrate something, I would suggest recording and then playing it back. And then notice where you tune out. Where do you get bored? Where do you stop listening? Where does your mind wander? And that will give you a pretty good indication of how long your episode should be. Should you write a script, use bullet points, or just talk from the top of your head? Well, right now I'm talking off the top of my head. However, I've been thinking about this topic for a long time. So it's almost like I have bullet points in my brain right now that I'm checking off. This is going to depend largely on your communication style. When I first started doing these episodes, I definitely scripted them out almost completely. And then I would read, but because I have acting and theater training, I was able to read without sounding too much like I was reading. At least that's what I thought in the beginning. And then the first time that I did an episode that was with no notes, no bullet points, no Post-its spread across my desk, and just recording what came directly from my heart. The first time I did that, I said that's what I was doing, and people were like, oh my God, that was the best episode ever. So, if you're going to script, make sure that you can read it without sounding like you're reading it. Also, I would say try not to be so married to the script that as you're recording, you are able to go on a tangent that comes to your mind in the moment. You are able to rephrase something that doesn't quite sound the way you want it to sound out loud as it did on paper. Sometimes there's a better way to say something than the way that you've written it. If you are going to script, I would say see if you can experiment with not writing things out word for word and just having topics or bullet points. Or like I said, one thing I like to do, I have a shelf that runs over my recording desk. And so therefore, I can put Post-it notes across that shelf with a main topic or theme or idea that I want to hit. And when I have filled up the entire width of the shelf with Post-it notes, that's all the content I can put in one episode. When it comes time to record your solo episodes, especially if you're not scripted or if you don't have bullet points, it's really important to know whether you're going to edit this episode and how much. I say edit your episodes. Yes, be prepared. The more preparation and scripting you do in the beginning, probably the less editing you have to do. And the more you're talking off the top of your head, like this episode, then the less preparation you've done, the more editing you're going to have to do. But I like to give myself space. So if I say something and then I want to think about the next thing that comes out of my mouth, I can leave a big old long pause because I know I'm going to take it out later. Also, if I say something and because I'm a good podcaster who's wearing headphones, even though I'm recording a solo episode and I'm listening to myself talk as I'm recording, if I hear that my voice sounded whistly or that there was a little thing that I needed to clear my throat, you're like, that, it doesn't sound good when people clear their throat, right? If I notice that, then I can pause and then say it over again so that I know I can take that out. Or if maybe I said something and I'm like, there's a better way to say that, I can rephrase. And it gives me time to explore what I want to say and maybe even go on a tangent that I might not even include in the final episode, but maybe it was interesting. And when I play it back in editing, I'll know whether I want to include it or not, or whether the episode is going on too long. Like right now, I don't know where we are in the finished version of this podcast, but my record time is running to about 14 minutes, and I know I'm getting close to the end for me. Okay, so where are we? Solo episodes. Know what the point is, what you want the listener to get out of it. Tell stories. Even that little thing I told you about the recording time, even that was like a little micro story. 3 was use the exact right amount of time to tell your story and to get the point across, not more, not less. 4, know your best delivery style. Scripted, bullet points, post-it notes, unscripted, off the top of your head. Know that the more preparation you do, the less editing you can do, and the less preparation, the more editing you're probably going to do. And practice so that no matter what, you sound conversational and you sound like you're talking directly to someone, because you are the person who's listening to you. So don't sound like you're reading. Don't sound like you're talking to a huge hall of 500 people. You're talking to one person. I am talking to one person. I am speaking to you. I hope I sound like I'm speaking to you. And then edit. Give yourself space to edit. Give yourself permission to stray from your script or go down a rabbit hole if you're going to edit. And then my last little bonus here, where do you come up with ideas for what to put in your solo episodes? So I talked about knowing what you want your listeners to get out of it. And I talked about using stories, but where do those stories come from? Here are a few things that I have done in the past that really help. Make a brainstorm list. Take your topic, like let's say for the Creative Impostor, imposter syndrome, and just brainstorm all the different topics that you can think of within that category. What are the different types of imposter syndrome? What are the things we want to learn about? Who are different people that I can look at or talk about? How have I experienced imposter syndrome? When does it come up for me? And throughout your day-to-day living, notice things that happen, and your brain will attune to these opportunities for stories that you can then later share on your podcast once your brain knows that it's supposed to be looking for those things. I like to keep all of my story ideas in a Trello. So Trello is a project management software that my audio engineer, Edwin, forced me to start using. And I was super resistant, but I love it. It's really helping me keep track of my ideas, because every time I have an idea for an episode, I have a list for Podcast Envy and a list for the Creative Impostor, and I make a card for that idea, even if all it is a card with that title, and I have no idea how I'm going to flesh that out or what's going to go into it, etc. And then for Podcast Envy, because I have affiliate podcast angels that I also mention, and that is part of the content of my episode, then that is also going to go in that card, and that helps me track that content as well. Oh, did I say podcast angel? I almost forgot to put my podcast angel in this episode of Podcast Envy. I have so much on my mind. Yes, this week's podcast angel is you. Since this episode is all about solos are all about you. Well, that's arguable. It could be all about your listener. Well, solos are all about you talking to your listener. In any case, the podcast angel is you. Patreon. Patreon.com/Andrea Klunder. I think that's how it works. I don't know. Link to it from the show notes. Find Andrea Klunder, that's me, on Patreon. And please consider $2 a month, $5 a month, $100 a month. Any bucks a month would really help me to continue to produce quality, consistent, solid, awesome, amazing podcast boss, podcasting tips, resources, etc. for you. Because once again, it's all about you. That was possibly the worst podcast angel spot I've ever recorded, but it's been a long day and I'm going to stick with it. So looking for content for your solo episodes, just train your brain that you're looking for stories, you're looking for examples, you're living your life and doing your thing, and you're observing. You can find examples of things through reading. You can find examples of things on social media. You can find examples of things to talk about while you're out and about in your daily life. And also, you can make lists. You can make top 5 lists. You can make bullet point lists. And the way I come up with topics for Podcast Envy is really the same way. I'm out and about doing my work, living my life, and people will ask me a question, or I'll see something on Facebook that's related to podcasting that makes me think of a thing, or a coaching client will ask me something, or something will make me want to have a rant about something. Those are the ways I get ideas for solo episodes. Observe, 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 observe. And then tell a story about what you found. Oh yeah, and there's that little thing called imposter syndrome that makes you think that you are a total fraud, you don't know what you're talking about, and you can't do solo episodes, and no one is going to want to listen to you, and your solo episodes are never going to be as good as that podcast boss Andrea's solo episodes are, so why even try? All of that is lies, all of that is fake. It's totally valid that you feel that way, but get over it. Do your solo episodes. Practice. Don't be a perfectionist like me. You will get better and better and better, and you may be surprised. You may actually love doing your solo episodes. All right, so now that I've talked all about solo episodes and I sort of segued into imposter syndrome, I want to let you know about a little something that I'm going to try that's different here on Podcast Envy. So this episode is coming out June 27. I'm going to take a break for the 4th of July. I was going to publish content. I was going to do some whole thing about Independence Day and independent podcasters and woohoo. But no, we're not going to do that. So a little bit of a break on the 4th. Go back and listen to some of your favorite episodes. Or if you haven't already, check out my other show, The Creative Impostor. And then starting on July 11th, we are going to have the great crossover series between The Creative Impostor and Podcast Envy. And that is featuring some other awesome podcasters talking all about podcasting and imposter syndrome. We're going to kick that series off July 11th with Bree Seeley of But How. And I have a whole bunch of other podcasters lined up to talk to all about this imposter syndrome thing. So we can A, learn about some new shows, B, find out how other people are making their podcasts, and C, learn that we are not alone. You are not alone. There are other podcasters who feel that way too, and they still keep podcasting anyway. I also want to mention that if you are going to Podcast Movement, I'm speaking at 11 a.m. on Wednesday during the conference. My talk is called Power Your Story, High School, Autism, Diverse Learning, and Podcast Mentoring. And it is for you. If you are interested in any of those things, if you are an educator, if you are a podcaster who's looking for an alternative way of having a revenue stream that does not involve like selling ads and sponsors on your show, if you are a podcaster who wants to give back to the community and make a difference, if you are somebody who enjoys working with youth or diverse populations, all of these topics will be covered. Or if you just want to find out more about my high school program called Power Your Story, or if you just want to come hang out with me, I'd love to see you in Philadelphia at Podcast Movement. Links to all of the things will be in the show notes for this episode at podcastenvy.com. I thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Podcast Envy is produced by your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder. That's me. The Podcast Envy theme music is by Valentin Sosnitsky, courtesy of the Free Sound Project at freesound.org, and our podcast Angel music is by Benjamin Mastropolito, also on freesound.org as Lemon Cream. All music is licensed under the Creative Commons. Our episodes are mixed by Edwin Ruiz, and hey, if you want your show to sound as good as ours, hire us. Put the magic audio mojo of the Creative Impostor Studios to work for you. Thanks so much for listening, and here's to making your podcast the envy of everyone else.